Welcome back to Off-Road Origins as we get lost and found in Arizona. After a hiatus in 2020, we're back on the trail and more equipped than ever. In this installment, we find true adventure as we make a series of wrong turns following a popular off-roading app, attempting to drive the back way to Crown King. It'll turn out to be one of our favorite days of wheeling ever in some of the most beautiful and rugged areas the northern Sonoran Desert has to offer.
2020 was not a great year for anyone, but for Cody and his family, it was especially hard. Starting with losing his prized Frontier, in which Cody broke 4 ribs along with some other bumps and bruises. He also lost both of his beloved grandparents, Lionel and Ruby. His wife Amy became very ill and spent 3+ months in and out of the hospital.
In September, Cody was diagnosed with aggressive parotid gland cancer that required surgery and months of post-surgical treatments. On top of that, his mom, Donna, was diagnosed with cancer of her own. I'm happy to report that all 3 are making recoveries. The news was not all bad, though, as the Bessler tribe increased their numbers by 1 with the addition of their second grandchild, Grayson.
Steve's 2020 was very challenging at his work. Managing changes brought about by COVID has kept him very busy. Adjusting to the continued changes while also staying in touch with friends and family was his top priority.
Despite all of this, we were still able to get in some trail time with a short trip out to the Oregon coast with Cody's first replacement vehicle, a 2012 FJ Cruiser. We spent a few days exploring and sightseeing.
And Jake has made a lot of changes to his '87 Toyota since you last saw it. We'll go into some detail in a future episode, but long story short, it has much more capability than it used to. A lot of hot days, late nights, and hard work. It's looking great and wheeling even better.
Cody's new ride is a 94 80 series Land Cruiser, triple locked, riding on 37s. It needed a lot of attention between picking it up in December and leaving on this trip in March. He was actually wrenching on it until 10:30 the night before we left.
Striking out early, we traveled from our homes in Northern California on our way to Cody's dad's place in northern Arizona. We arrived to snow on the ground as the temperatures dipped down well below freezing overnight. Morning arrived quickly and snow melted. However, the storm closed down the interstate, which required us to make our way down some sloppy back roads.
We got to Seligman. Had to take a shortcut. A little bit of mud.
The interstate did reopen, but our goal of making it down to the desert and on trail today faded due to the slowdown. I have an idea where we can set up camp though. I lived in Arizona for several years before relocating to California a couple of decades ago. With any luck, this dry wash still has a good camping spot. It was a rugged drive, but we had finally made contact with the edge of the northern Sonoran Desert. Arizona has one of the most diverse biomes I've seen, and in the next video that we will release soon, we go from Sonoran Desert to high desert junipers to ponderosa forests in 7 miles. Truly an amazing transition. This old trail going down into the wash definitely had a steeper transition than it once did, but I think we should be fine here.
I'd do it straight, but you got it, just go.
We'll set up camp down at the bottom here, and we should caution everyone that it can be foolish to set up camp at the bottom of a dry wash, but since it was not monsoon season and no weather was forecast, we felt pretty safe.
With camp set up, I heated up a quick meal that included veggies and some pre-cooked vacuum-wrapped smoked brisket that I warmed up in some hot water. We would turn in early and get a good start in the morning.
Cody's dad, Don, joined us for this part of the journey, and it was a true fit for our group. His knowledge of Arizona and storytelling ability helped us feel a little more connected to Arizona. He certainly had a great deal of knowledge about the state and the region.
So good morning. We're back on the trail. We came in last night. We've been here in Arizona for about a day. It's been a cool start to our trip. We came down, got down into the desert from coming from up north in northern Arizona, up near I-40. It was really cold the first night, so we're happy to get down here into the desert portion. It was still cold last night, but it wasn't completely frigid. So we're striking out here from our first camp, and our goal is to just do a portion of this trail that we came in on. It's just off of I-17. Boy, oh boy, kind of near the Crown King exit, but I think this is a tributary of the Turkey Creek, but we're going to go down it for a little bit this morning, and then see where our vehicles take us. We go on to explore a few easy trails around the area where we had camped before making our way over to Interstate 17, where we traveled south to the Lake Pleasant area. Arriving here, we soon found the area was populated by many wild burros. We also found that they really liked Jake's air horn and would pray to us from miles away for a few minutes after hearing it. It was pretty funny.
It was definitely unexpected. Anyway, we knew that we wanted to drive the back way to Crown King, but we had explored around a little bit too much in the morning, so we decided to explore the network of interesting trails to the north of Lake Pleasant. Here we descended into a small canyon that we found infinitely interesting. The rock canyon walls were covered in lichen and were composed of sedimentary rock.
They had holes and caves all over in them, and it certainly piqued the imagination. How did this rock form? How was it eroded in this way? How long would it take Mother Nature to change it in this arid place? I'm certain that some geologists had answers to these questions, but maybe some questions should never be answered. Curiosity sparks the explorer in all of us, I think.
Agreed. I think these types of areas are the reason we own a four-wheel drive and the reason we take these trips. This specific area is the northern edge of the Sonoran Desert, and as you'll see over the next day or so, perhaps the most beautiful part. At any rate, when we got here to the bottom, I made a friendly wager with my dad, who rode with me while he was on the trip with us, that I could drive over this big boulder on the right here. He didn't think I should even try, to be quite honest.
Yeah, Steve was riding with me, and we had no idea what Cody was doing here. We were probably just as surprised as his dad that he went out of his way to drive over it. It was pretty damn big. But his big tires combined with a 6-inch lift allowed him to clear it as he climbed over it on his right side. Pretty impressive.
We followed in and out of this wash for a few miles as we continued to see burros, cactus, and wild desert. After getting home, we researched where these burros had come from and learned that they were once tame beasts of burden from the gold rush era. A Spanish priest named Manuel Lopez was the first person known to have mined and extracted gold from Arizona in 1774. Though there's no evidence that he used burros at that time, subsequent miners from Mexico and elsewhere mined Arizona gold using beasts of burden before being lured to the California gold fields in 1849. More gold and silver mines continued operating using burros right up to the beginning of World War II. Many of them would be turned out into the wild once a claim was played out. They've certainly thrived here ever since, and everyone we saw seemed to be fat and happy.
That's for sure. It always seems like there wouldn't be enough for these big animals to eat, but the nutritional content of wild plants in the desert here can sustain a large group of grazing animals. When I lived in Arizona, my brother Ryan and I unintentionally ended up in the middle of a cattle stampede in the middle of the night as we were hiking in the desert south of Phoenix. It seemed to go on forever as we took cover behind a large dead mesquite tree. It felt like we could have stuck our foot out and tripped them as they ran past us on either side of the tree, and we could have easily touched them. There were hundreds of head for sure. That's when I realized the desert plants that can be found in the Sonoran Desert must be super nutritious and can sustain a large number of herbivores.
As we start back out of the canyon here, we began chatting about the need to find a suitable campsite. The shadows are starting to get longer, and we like to set up camp with daylight to spare. That way, we have time to make our camp comfortable, cook a good meal, and still be able to sit around a campfire discussing whatever topic comes up. Honestly, I couldn't wait to hear some of the stories Cody's dad would tell us about Cody's childhood.
Heck yeah! I can't wait either.
I'm sure you'll get what you ask for. Dad's a pretty good storyteller. Anyway, this little section is trickier than it appears on camera, with a couple of big rocks and a narrow washed out section on a steep climb out of the canyon here. Let's see how we do.
Is there a big boulder right here anyway?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, you got plenty of clearance. Okay, here's one coming up and right on the same spot.
I'll go over that sucker.
As we descended back into our little canyon, we came across an area with many saguaros that had been blown down, like this one.
Okay. Just gonna hit the same spot he did and hope for the best here. Okay. God, these things are big. Wow, look at that one. That's got to be over 1,000 years old. That's amazing.
More research after we got home indicates that saguaros grow an inch for every 10 years. We didn't have a way to measure that one, but it was damn tall.
As we searched for a good spot to set up camp, Cody decided to follow some tracks down the wash here. It was a boulder field and not a spot that an average 4x4 could traverse. I decided to get out and film outside the vehicle.
Well, I'm not going that way.
As the 5 o'clock hour approached, we found a flat, sandy bench above the creek bed. A perfect place to set up camp. We just needed to follow the trail over there. The closer we got to the edge of the Bradshaw Mountains, the larger the river rocks seemed to be. It would make for some slow going for sure.
We settled in beside this rock face and got a good meal in us as we prepared for the big day tomorrow. It'll turn out to be one of my favorite days off pavement ever.
All right, here we are, breaking camp again. Getting about 8:30 to this morning, and we're gonna hit the trail and head up to Crown King. Probably try to get there by lunch and hit some side trails on the way probably and find some good stuff.
I'm going to ribbon cut this here by saying we are not going to make it to Crown King today. In fact, we won't even get very close to the turnoff to the back way to Crown King until late in the afternoon. What we did do is get lost in the Southern Bradshaw Mountains. A popular off-roading app had mislabeled some trails, so what we were following was taking us further and further away from our day's objective.
Limp noodle there.
Starting back out from camp meant having to go back the way we had come in. This meant we were going to have to drive over the big saguaro log, but this time going uphill. I should say that this thing was nearly 18 inches around where we had to go over it.
Big log.
So we were driving along the trail here and we came across this outcropping here, and I thought it looked like stacked rocks, and the more we drove around it, the more that starts to look like stacked rocks up there. So a native settlement of some kind, perhaps, up on top of this ridge. We're gonna hike up there and find out. Here comes the boys. Well, king of the castle, first to the find. Very unusual. Very unusual. Native, most likely. Native building site. There's a sign up in here. Let's see what it says. Here's what it says. Jake's made it up. Yeah.
My dad and I have come across other native structures in Arizona, and I can say, having seen this one, that it was probably used as a defensive retreat. The likelihood was that it was designed and used to defend against other invading tribes.
Soon after, we came upon Tule Creek Homestead. The homestead is located along Tule Creek, north of Lake Pleasant. It was built for a gold mining operation, and a dam was built along the creek to aid in that endeavor. So far, the trail coming in is pretty easy, but it's also the end of the trail our app had designated the back way to Crown King. To the right of our vehicles here is a trail going through the mesquites and down to the creek. This is the way we thought was going to get us back to where we needed to be, but we were mistaken.
All right, 10:30 in the morning. We've been on the trail for probably an hour and a half or so, maybe a little bit longer. We had a couple of good excursions here. We're trying to do the back way to Crown King, but we're finding so many trails to explore, side trails to explore. We're gonna see a whole lot of Arizona that is outside of that trail. So it's a beautiful area. Found a nice little Native American dwelling or retreat or something up on the top of one of the mountains we hiked up to this morning, and we went past an old mining site just probably 15 minutes ago, and we're on this really cobbly, rocky trail, and doesn't look like it's used too terribly often, but we enjoy these types of trails, getting off of the beaten tracks, and explore some of the lesser known trails. We don't know what to call this trail, whether it has a name, whether it has a number. Can't tell you. We kind of know which direction we're going, so we just point our vehicles in that direction and let the wheels take us. This is pretty well traveled. So yeah, we've had a bit of a rainy night last night. In the middle of the night, it came down pretty hard, and just for a little while. And now we've got these spotty clouds that have some moisture in them, but just enough to sprinkle on the windshield a little bit. Keeps the dust down, keeps the temperature down, and we've had a heck of a good trip so far, and looking forward to continuing on here. We're kind of at a crossroad, and we're looking at the map to see which way makes the best sense to go. Well, here we are. This is a heck of an obstacle. Here, Jake's coming from up there. We're gonna try to get him down this, and hopefully unscathed.
I'm going to stop the tape here really quick. You see these trees up the canyon? Well, if you look really close, you'll see this lone palm tree. We saw these here and there out in the Southern Bradshaw Mountains. Very remote and unlikely spots for palms to grow. Well, after some research, we discovered that these old-timers must have planted palms near the springs out here. Everywhere there was a spring, sure enough, there was a palm. You could spot them from a ways off too, which is likely why they were planted there. Anyway, we thought it was interesting and we wanted to share it with you. Carry on, Jake.
What you can't appreciate here is how steep this was. We were driving down a knife's edge ridge with a cliff on the right and an off-camber descent to the left that was unbelievably steep.
Just inch it down. No, stop. Just stop there. I'm giving him hot hand gestures here. Off camera, so he's gonna come on down here. I'm gonna try to. You'll make that. Just follow. You'll be fine. Straight. Big drop. Big drop. Very, very, very slow. Slow, slow, slow. Hellaciously steep. I know you don't see that too well on the camera, but that was pretty steep. Great job, great job. Trail down isn't even that easy.
Well, this is what we just came down.
Pretty extreme. See the guys down below. They're down with the other truck. Cody's going down now with the Toyota. Going over a big drop there right now. It's a big ledge, drops down about 3 feet or more. Okay.
Mere inches.
Okay, just got done another pretty good obstacle there. Certainly a difficult one, and it would have been a little trickier if we had to go up rather than down, but I think we would have been able to do up or down on that trail, and Jake squeezed through there, no problems. And same with me. We're down in this creek bed again, and I think this is Humbug Creek, following this trail. The trail goes back up out of the canyon here in 100 yards or so, and getting a little pinstriping down the vehicle, but I've got the bed liner paint job, so it just knocks the dirt off is all. Yeah, we'll tie back into Humbug Creek on the other side of this mountain, and then we'll be off over towards the trail going up to Crown King.
We continued on, following the creek bed, traveling in roughly a northwesterly direction. On the map, we were heading towards the ghost town of Columbia. We were hoping to get there soon, but the trail was getting quite overgrown, and we saw no evidence that anyone had traveled here anytime recently, so it was becoming a concern for everyone.
Hey guys, I'm interrupting just to remind you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It means so much to us and we really appreciate it. Anyway, back to the action.
Yeah, I figured with the bigger tires I'd be outpacing Jake 2-1. And he's going pretty good with those 33s. It's hard for me to keep up with him.
In reality, I was really trying to redeem myself by finding a way out and onto the main road to our west. I was running the OnX off-roading app on my phone, so I felt a sense of responsibility to get us back on track. Generally, we found it to be a good app, however, today it took us the wrong way.
Yeah, all in all, it's done pretty well for us until this day. I really wanted to love my Magellan TRX-7 off-road navigation system that I had, and I'll call this my official review of that product. It worked intermittently and poorly when it did work, which wasn't often. The product and technical support was an embarrassment too. I was embarrassed to have it in my vehicle, and I literally gave it away because I figured if somebody had paid me money for it, they may come back for revenge. Sorry, Magellan, but I'll never buy another one of your products. At least with Jake's app, it was just a mislabeled trail.
We stopped here to look at this old rock structure at the base of this hill on the edge of Humbug Creek. At this point, the branches are overgrowing the trail in a huge way, but we've driven the Alexander Mackenzie Heritage Trail. We've learned to ignore sticks and branches that don't tear parts off or otherwise damage anything important.
So we came across this rock structure. Hard to say whether it was miners or natives, but certainly a small building of some kind that somebody had here. Pretty neat.
This area was mined extensively for many years, so our best guess is that the rock structure was built by miners, though it may never have been completed. The fireplace looked like it had never even seen a fire. Anyways, the rocks in this creek bed were incredibly unusual. Virtually all of them were encrusted with some form of mica. The camera doesn't pick it up, but everywhere we looked, it was glimmering rocks. It was so unique and unusual. Don mentioned how great they would be to use as landscaping rocks. They were fascinating to us all for sure.
You running your rear diff lock?
It's always locked.
Oh yeah, that's right. Alright.
Jake's running a lunchbox locker in his rear differential that his dad installed after buying the old girl new, and recently had an ARB air locker added to the front. It's a little beast of an IFS truck right now, to say the least. As I mentioned earlier, we'll go into more detail of all he's done in one of the next videos we put out, but Jake's done a lot of work to her since inheriting it.
As we traversed up this hill, Cody noted how great the ground looked for gold mining. He mentioned that there was no overburden and no evidence that this hillside had been mined. Cody, his brother Ryan, and Don have dabbled in amateur gold prospecting over the years and have taken gold out of the ground in the United States and Canada.
Very small amounts, but yes, we definitely love to pan and prospect around. The biggest problem here is the lack of water. There are small springs in this area, but nothing that would support even a small operation. I'd love to see a bigger operation at work here though. At least some testing to see what's here. Many of the operations in this area, like anywhere else gold is found, went bust. The reasons probably vary, but I bet a lot has to do with the lack of water. I have to say that Steve had the biggest potty mouth on this trip, and I ended up having to edit out many bad words, but most were out of alarm and fear of death, and of being in the passenger seat. However, this spot I literally had to mute it. I caught up to Steve in about 3 or 4 sentences. It was pretty bad. The reason was that we had come to the end of this trail. The boulder field ahead of us was too difficult for Jake to make it through.
Well, we are traveling up this wash. We are following the trail. The trail seems to have petered out about 20 yards behind us, and if it keeps going, boy oh boy, there's no evidence that it keeps going, and we don't want to trailblaze our own path if this isn't a trail. So we're going to turn back. We're going to stop and take a quick lunch here. There's Dad. Steve's fixing himself a quick sandwich, and Jake's getting his stuff together.
We can't complain too much about this trail, though. Yes, we were trying to make it to and through the back way to Crown King, but we had found a trail less traveled. A difficult trail in spots and some of the most beautiful areas we've been to. We're already making plans on a future trip to this area. There's a labyrinth of trails out here, and most are as unused or underused as this one.
I'm bringing my gold pan next time.
That should be interesting. Anyway, there's some difficult tracks going back the way we came, and we won't be going down all the same trails we came in on. Even still, we're going to get to a spot soon where Jake's going to struggle. It's steep, it's off camber, and there's a washed out section that the slope of the hill wants to push you towards. Again, our filmmaking skills and the cameras won't do it justice, but let's see how it all works out.
As Dad and I strike up out of the creek bed here, we see Jake and Steve struggling right up here. You can get a better idea of the steepness from this spot. So we still don't quite know how to capture how steep things are when we're trying to film live action and still keep the camera level to the earth. But this was pretty steep, and it was just about all the old girl could handle. There's a good driver behind the wheel though, and he knows her limits.
Might need your front rocker on for that one, huh? I'd turn this way.
So Cody's going to walk up this pretty easily. Even still, you see the cruiser slip a little bit towards the edge due to the off-camber spot. I went with Cody when he bought this 80 series, and it was a beast at that time. He spent every spare moment since getting it ready for this type of terrain, and it shows.
Even starting out from this spot near the top of that obstacle was steep, and as we continue on, you'll see that it stays pretty steep. Nothing that would be challenging, but it was such an awesome area here. It was a true pleasure being out here with the boys, seeing the majesty of this part of the Southwest. What more can we ask for? And we're at the very beginning of our trip through Arizona.
Exactly. Yeah, I love the trips we do. I never take them for granted. It's a ton of work to plan and coordinate each trip, but boy, it's worth it. I know I've said it before, but each trip we've done has been beyond epic. I hope everyone watching gets the opportunity to adventure like this.
Yeah, and you don't need to have an extremely modified 4x4 to get out and see new places and have adventures of your own either. Plan right, pack wise, and know your vehicle's limits. If you do, you can have one heck of an adventure of your own.
Yep, there's everything from forums to social media groups where you can find information about everything you need to know about whatever style adventure you want to tackle. They're an invaluable resource and I use them often. I've learned a ton about my cruiser over the last few months that way.
Anyway, having crested this hill, we'll keep on this trail over to the next hillside. Crossing that one is not for the faint of heart, as you'll see.
Okay, so this is what some people call a shelf road.
The term road isn't an exaggeration, I think. I'm all the way to the left, and the GoPro here is on the right side of my bumper. My track width is a good 3 to 4 inches wider than where it sits.
I'll honestly say that I was absolutely white-knuckled and literally found myself holding my breath through here. When we came through before I was on the inside, against the hill, it turns out ignorance is bliss.
When Steve did breathe, it was to say bad words under his breath, I think. Cody mentioned that he may have had to edit out a few coming up.
Absolutely a true story. This washed out section coming up was the most fun part. Here's where I may have had to mute it for sensitive ears. What's funny to Jake and me is that you almost never hear those kinds of words from Steve. Not on camera, anyway.
It was all organic and unscripted, that's for sure.
A little less sketch going that way on that one.
So I'm going to take a moment here to go over how I got into off-roading, and I'm going to let the boys give their version of how they got into off-roading as well. But I'm going to start with myself. How I got into wheeling, four-wheeling, and off-roading. It started with my very first vehicle. I had a 1977 Volkswagen Rabbit diesel. It was a great little vehicle, and what really was great about it for me in hindsight was that I had to work on that. I was wrenching on that. When I wasn't driving it, I was literally having to wrench on it just to keep it on the road. And it was a great little vehicle, and I had a lot of fun with it, but ultimately I ended up getting an upgraded version, an 84. So 7 years newer version. My dad and I went out, took a look at it. I had the money to buy it. I bought it. What was great about that is 4 doors versus 2, and also getting a gas versus the diesel. That diesel was pretty tired, and it was really not really very quick. It was very economical, but not very quick. But ultimately, that 84 Volkswagen was the very first vehicle that I think I really off-roaded. it sounds funny, and it is funny. It's funny to think of a person off-roading a Volkswagen Rabbit, an old Volkswagen Rabbit, but that's how I started. And it started with a friend of mine graduating from high school. He was a year behind me in school. He graduated. I went up to Canada. We basically traveled from Alberta over into British Columbia, and we adventured along the way. We camped. We lived out of the car. We literally bathed in the creeks along the side of the trail road wherever we were going. It was a great adventure. Eventually that summer, I ended up moving to Arizona and starting college in Arizona. I met my wife. Very second class actually that I had. We saw each other, and by the very next day where we had class, she was sitting behind me and chatting me up, and the rest is history. At any rate, our first date, I took my wife in my dad's two-wheel drive pickup up to Crown King. Not the back way to Crown King, the normal way to Crown King. And great adventure, but about 2 months later, I took my then girlfriend and my dad, and we did a little gold prospecting down on Turkey Creek. So I drove in quite a ways on Turkey Creek with the old Volkswagen Rabbit. And that's kind of how this all morphed. Eventually, I ended up buying a hard-bodied Nissan four-wheel drive, and boy, did my stepbrother and I ever have a lot of adventures out in the desert with that King Cab. It was a '97 King Cab Nissan hard-body pickup, and I wish I still had that vehicle. I sold it just after moving to California in 2001, and boy, I wish I had kept it. It was a nice little vehicle, and boy, was it a little beast off-road. But that's how I got into off-roading. It was, it's obviously an abbreviated version of all of the stories, but that kind of gives you an idea. I'm going to kick it over to Steve. Steve's come along with me and with us on a lot of adventures, and he doesn't drive his own vehicle, obviously, but he's been along on a lot of adventures, and he's got an interesting story, I'm sure, to tell you. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about what got you into off-roading.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Cody. Well, the first thing I'll say is that I'm the least mechanical person that you'll ever meet in your life. I don't know the first thing about working on vehicles. I'm enjoying the process of kind of learning, but the thing about this for me is that I really just enjoy being out with Cody and Jake on these trips. And to give you some background, I did some camping when I was a kid with my family and a little bit of hiking. But we didn't do any off-roading. I didn't know anybody that did any off-roading. But I got to know Cody and Jake through hockey, and we met up, and after playing hockey together, we did a trip out in the desert together. And what I realized from that trip is that I would have, I had this opportunity to just see these areas of the country that I otherwise would just never see. These places that people can't get to without a four-wheel drive vehicle. And on top of that, I got to hang out with my great friends and just have an absolute blast, doing it. So, that's sort of how it all started for me. And then from there, I've just been very fortunate to go on these trips. Cody and I did just an epic trip to the Arctic Ocean, and saw some places that just most people in their lifetime will absolutely never get a chance to experience, and it was just really something special. And from there, that led to the Alexander Mackenzie Trail trip that we all did together, and again, just an absolute blast. So that's really my story. I've just really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to come along on these trips and film and just have these experiences that are just amazing. So yeah, that's the deal for me.
Well, it certainly wouldn't be the same without you on these adventures, so I really enjoy you along with us. And I'm going to kick it over to Jake. Jake has some great stories to tell you, so Jake, take it over.
Well, thanks, guys. So my first taste of off-roading was with my father. we've always been outdoorsy, hunting, fishing, camping, that type of stuff. And every summer and every chance that we got, we would go out and explore and partake in adventures. Really, my experience actually started with the red truck that I have. My dad actually bought this truck brand new off the dealership floor and didn't do too many mods to it. Put a winch on it, put a little bit of a brush guard on it, and a shell and a rack. But we would load up camping gear, hunting gear, a canoe on the top, anything that we were doing that particular trip, and take off for a week or two. And great adventures. This truck has been all over California, Oregon, Washington, into Nevada. We've taken several trips up into Canada growing up, and even up to Alaska a few times. And all of the trips, we've tried to get off the road, off the highway, and find lakes and areas that were a little bit tough to get to, but not necessarily as extreme as some of the stuff we're doing today and in some of our most recent trips. One of the big advantages we actually had when planning these trips out is my dad had an airplane, and we would fly around and do recon trips, here and there, and find remote spots and areas that looked interesting to us, whether it be a lake or a stream or even like a ghost town out in Nevada. And we would come back home, and my father would plan out a trip and map everything out, and then figure out what we needed, pack the truck up, and I'd get out of school one afternoon and we would just take off. And it was just an amazing childhood growing up, with this type of stuff and off-roading. And I'm just really happy to be able to keep the tradition alive and going, and keep doing what we did when I was growing up, and keep the red truck alive. This thing, it's got about 500,000 miles on it actually, and it takes a little maintenance, but it is a Toyota. It's a tough truck, and just loving every second of it. And I don't know, I've been a lot of places, but there's still a lot of places out there that I haven't been, and looking forward to finding some new areas and continue exploring.
Well, boys, thanks for the stories. It's always interesting to hear how people got into off-roading. Anyway, we're now on the road that will take us to the back way to Crown King. We won't be able to drive it today, so we'll find a camping spot and get ready for tomorrow. Thanks again for watching, and please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We also love to hear from you, so leave a comment. We try to get back to everybody. Thanks again.